This project began before Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, Naked Lunch, because I met David Cronenberg in Toronto at the film festival in 1981, when Bad Timing was shown there, and I spent an evening with him in a bar, and he was talking about what did he want to do and what did I want to do, and he said, I'd like to make a film with Naked Lunch, and I, at that moment he said that to me, I thought, well, I know that book so well, and you are the only person in the whole planet who could make a film of it.
You knew that already, that Cronenberg was the man?
Well, I didn't know until he said to me, I'd like to make a Naked Lunch. But at that moment, there was like the only time that I've had like a certain thing, I saw the movie, because I knew Cronenberg's films well. And I thought, well, there's nobody else who can make this film about Naked Lunch, because it's unfilmable. And people have tried to do it, and many people have tried and thought of doing it. But it is something that you really, you'd have to have an imagination, another imagination from within the imagination, you know. So Cronenberg, I suddenly thought, well, he can do it. This man can do it, you know, because I'd just seen Videodrome, and I'd seen his films, and I was a big fan of his, you know, and I went and I got the rights from William Burroughs for $1,000 a year. Cronenberg said, I will write the script, and he didn't write the script for years, and I kept on optioning the book year after year after year. Then I took a trip with William Burroughs and David Cronenberg and Hercules Belval, myself, and James Grauholtz, who was working, who was very close with Burroughs. We went to Tangier and spent a week or 10 days in Tangier, where the book was written, and visited with Paul Bowles. Little did I know at that time that I was even going to make a film with Shooting Sky later. We visited with Paul Bowles, and we spent the time, and Burroughs showed us everywhere. David decided where he was going to make the film. Cut. A few years later, was doing Shooting Sky. I saw him in Tangier. David Cronenberg came back to Tangier because I was there working with Bernardo on the. We went to chose the locations again. The designer came, and then the Gulf War happened. So he couldn't get insurance. He couldn't make the film in North Africa as planned, and in like a 3-month period, had to recreate Africa, North Africa, or the vibe of North Africa in the studio in Toronto, including getting camels from the zoo, which would walk up and down behind a cafe, which would be in the high street in Toronto, on a back street in Toronto. And so the whole idea of the marketplace, the place where you see Ian Holm in the market with Judy Davis and those scenes, those are all shot, somehow we managed to make it. So you didn't even get a smell of Africa in the film. And they're all done, and it's all done in this very unusual way. And I think it gave the film an even additional element that gave the discipline that the film had to feel like you were in Tangier. But we were in Toronto. Naked Lunch, I think, was $12 million.
So it wasn't cheap?
It wasn't cheap, no, because it would have to be, or maybe it was actually, I think it was not, it was going to be $12 million, and it ended up costing nearer $10 million, now I remember, because we made a saving not going to Morocco. And that was one good thing that happened out of the Gulf War. It was a strong book, you know, like when I read Crash as well, you know, they're strong books, you know. There were books which were like going to see the films in the ICA, you know. Those were the books that were in my group of people, you know, those are the culture that I was in. So that's why that was one of the books that I read then, you know. It was a book that was important that was to be read. I didn't think about that. No, I don't think so. Because Cronenberg had the Burroughs' belief in him, and Allen Ginsberg came to the filming, and Allen Ginsberg were all in belief of the film and the way that we made the film and the end result. So we were in a way protected by the people who were still alive, the people in the story. So they all defended the film as well. The effects are done by Chris Wallace, who was an artist of these moving. It's an element of effects which are now mixed together more with digital effects. But at the time, we had no digital effects in this film, and it was all done with beasts made from David's and these people's imagination, the mugwump, and then worked with various tubes for various sort of fluids coming out of them. and various, and of course a lot of KY jelly is used on sort of give them a sort of glistening effect, which I was quite amazed at, this sort of technique that's used. But over the years they've built up this technique to make these creatures look good. And David's had it in The Scanners and The Brood and various other films. So these creatures appear, and or things to sort of just which could be in your fantasy. It was all done analog, so to speak. There was no digital stuff in it. It was all artists working with plastics and little bulbs of air to make things work and to make those strange creatures. And they were making those sort of strange creatures in many years ago, and even back to King Kong. It's just where the application of those. Because I worked with Ray Harryhausen on Sinbad's Golden Voyage when I was an assistant editor. And I always thought later, having worked with him, knowing he's a wonderful man and he's an incredible person and he's one of the brilliant cinema people, and I was it was a fantastic thing to see him work and what he did. But I thought the application of those Dynamation animals and monsters into something else within the brain of David Cronenberg was utilising the skills of Ray Harryhausen. Of course, you'd have some completely different sort of movies of some incredible, I don't know, pornographic dinosaurs or some, incredible thing going on. And then, whereas in the Cronenberg, he used all, imagination, or to create the typewriter that was a sex object, or a typewriter that was a beetle, which was an inspector, or the mugwump and the black meat, and all these various things that were created out of Burroughs' book, but they still had to be manifested on the screen. And when you read a book which is so far out, and you can't think how can this be manifested on the screen. But Burroughs was absolutely ecstatic and thrilled with the finished item, and he said, he just saw it and felt that it was absolutely caught his extremist moment of extremists, which he was still writing, and those scenes of Ginsberg and Kerouac picking up the letters and the notes. I think it's a wonderful film, in fact. I think it's such a very, very rich film. And I think one of the best films ever written about writing, and about the obsession of writing, and about the endless tunnel of writing, and the need for, how drugs have played an important part historically from, the beginning, when you see that little mushroom on the side, right the way through. Drugs have been an important part of literature as well. So that side of Naked Lunch, that was probably at the time I read it, that book was so intense about the experience of addiction. It was Howard Shore and Ornette Coleman. So to get the sort of feeling of the sort of beat feeling, we went for they went for Ornette Coleman, which I was thrilled about, to work with somebody like Ornette Coleman. The session was great. Those musicians are not. Their legend is as people, like actors and writers and anybody who builds a legend around their talent and their performance. They're just regular people when you meet them, and he's just a modest man who plays a beautiful instrument. And recently we had a screening of this at the Barbican when we made a version of the film without the music, but all the effects and the dialogue. And Ornette Coleman came to play live on the stage with Howard Shore conducting an orchestra, which was again, moved, it just shifted it a bit. And it was very good to see the film again with this sort of live score. I'd like to do it again. It's incredible how good our actor Peter Weller is. But he's Peter Weller is he's a world authority on Roman coins. A world authority on coinage. He's a fantastic musician. Plays music all the time. He's a multifaceted man. And he's a fantastic actor, and this role was, he looked a lot like Burroughs. And when you saw them together, and when Burroughs came to the set and you saw Weller in his Burroughs mode and Burroughs, it was very, very close. Part of producing films is about trying to understand what the the director and the material and the people involved in the film is going to be at the end. So, certain directors just direct the story, and then certain directors do certain special things. And Cronenberg is one of the directors who does special things with the way a film is and looks and feels and comes out to a viewer. And that's why he was able to take that out. And he did it again with Crash, the experiences I had with him, and he did it with Dead Ringers, and he's done it with other films who have got to a place where you see and they're seeing things and under seeing things that you don't really see normally in films. David Cronenberg is a very precise filmmaker and very prepared. He prepares a film enormously, and he works with the same collaborators time and again, and he's worked out his way of doing films, and he works in a very controlled and accurate way. And he starts at a certain time, and he finishes at a certain time, and he starts again, and he finishes again. And it's all done in a very, very calm way, with no raised voices, and it's fairly, maybe I wouldn't say clinical, but it's very, he's very, very clear, absolutely clear of, again, what he wants from the film, and he's not shooting a lot of film that he's not going to do put into the finished object.
Does he storyboard?
He storyboards scenes that have any complexities in them, and then he's a very, very experienced filmmaker, and he's a master. And I've been very lucky to work with master filmmakers who are, I mean, making the film is easy. I mean, it's not a difficult thing for them, and something which other directors find terrifying is for them, they're natural. You know, like a person who wins a marathon, they've got a natural ability to run the race. You know, there's somebody down the back, they're panting. They still finish the race, but they're panting away. These master filmmakers, it's not difficult for them to put the paint on the canvas. They can do it easily, putting together the shots, thinking about how the thing is, putting the film with the various transitions. That's easy for them. And then when you get into a next layer of sort of interest in a film, when you've got a filmmaker who can make a film so well, even from the first film, some people can do it. And Cronenberg is a natural filmmaker and has been doing it so long. So I must say, I was very impressed, and I've made lots of films by the time I worked with David Cronenberg. I was very impressed at the precision of his filmmaking. Well, it should have been probably made in the early 70s or late 60s, but it certainly shouldn't have been made today, that's for sure. Or it wouldn't be made today, no way.
Because the risk involved on producer? Or
well, because you wouldn't get the film into the... because the world has become narrower in terms of what you're allowed to do, and dominated by the market in America, and getting the ratings which you can get your film shown in the cinemas. And recently I've been trying to make films, or I'm making films, with similar ideals, and I'm finding them very more difficult to show. Such as Young Adam recently in America, with a film which we made, and in America it got a pornographic rating, whereas in Europe it gets a general rating, and in England it gets an adult rating. It's an adult film, but it's not considered something so shocking that you see a man without any clothes on. And now even a man without any clothes on will get you an NC-17 rating. I mean, you can chop and kill and slash and disembowel as much as you like, but a naked form now gives you a sex rating, unfortunately. They're all very risky, every film, you know. It's like this, but I thought that the combination of Cronenberg and Burroughs was, you know, as I said, William Burroughs and David Cronenberg invite you for lunch was in the first ad line, and I suppose that sort of mopped up sort of Burroughsian and Cronenberg fans to come and see the film. You know, to me it was irresistible. You know, it was irresistible to put that together, and that was very satisfying for me. You know, what I do as a producer, that was satisfying as well. That film, fought to get it done and put that together, because it's hard to get those sort of films to exist, but they last a long time because they show continually on places, and they're films that have a little interest because people are still interested in Naked Lunch, still interested in William Burroughs. I didn't expect there to be a good reception. I mean, you don't make films like that to expect a good reception from the Daily Mail. I mean, you just, you expect, if you got a good reception, you'd made a bad movie, you know. And, you know, Alexander Walker went on his trail, and all the various critics who I knew would go on their trail in the UK went on the trail, and the same sort of critics went on the trail in the other countries. But then there was another half of the critics whose mind were open, who were different sort of people, and they liked it and loved it. And then over the years, of course, these films become classics, and then the people who didn't like them, when it gets reviewed for the DVDs or television, another critic's reviewing it, and suddenly that newspaper calls it a masterpiece and gets 5 stars. When they originally reviewed it, it got 0 stars. And that's happened to so many films of mine, including The Last Emperor, which I think got a zilch from Alexander Walker in the Evening Standard, but when it came out after 9 Oscars, and now it gets 5 stars in the TV review. So, I mean, there's no relation, time and criticism, and it just depends what sort of person they are and what the critic's background is and whether they find it offensive what you're trying to talk about. Whereas, the other half of the critics find offensive the sort of films that they like. So, that's what film criticism is about. So when the film came out, I was expecting a mixed bag of criticism, and I was expecting a mixed bag of results. But the film, it was respectable. It wasn't a hit. It was a respectable performance, but it has become something that people want to see, especially younger generations. And you always use your children as an example, but my late teenage son, 18, he's writing about Naked Lunch now, and because the film is there, and he's they're interested in the book, and there's one of the books that they're doing is Naked Lunch, and the film is it's not Charles Dickens, it's William Burroughs, and so that is to me, well, and that might go on forever. Look what they were like, look what those people were like, how decadent they were. I mean, if you're making films dealing with life, drugs are part of life historically, and from ancient rites in the past and rituals, and man has always seeked out something to take him out of their reality and into somewhere else, and illegal or not illegal, people will find it, whether it be an aspirin, a whiskey, or something stronger.
But this film kind of advocates the use of them in a way to be.
Well, I don't think it does advocate them. I mean, I don't think it does advocate them. It's rather like it's discussing. It's certainly not advocating. It's discussing. I mean, I don't think anybody would like to be in the state that we see the William Burroughs in the film. He doesn't die, but he's certainly the most lost and troubled character that you have seen. He's completely empty, and he did write an incredible book, but it was out of incredible pain. I'd had several lunches with them, yeah.
What was that like?
Enjoyable. Very, very enjoyable, especially the ones in Morocco. No, it was very enjoyable. This job is very difficult, but there's sometimes when you get incredible things, sort of memories that engraved on your hard drive, and certainly sort of William Burroughs in Tangier, that's on my hard drive as one of the incredible experiences. Privileged to have such an experience.
Does he hold court?
He's a modest man. People recognized him from the years before. Old men recognized him. He was he never took off his suit and his hat and his tie. He was very immaculate, always delicate. Even when he was down and out, he was always in a suit and tie. He was never casual. I never saw him casual ever. He was always dressed properly, like a gentleman. William Burroughs, I think he was, he was of course black sheep of the family and was down and out in Tangier, but he had a long writing career after Naked Lunch, and has published many books and articles, and is an icon of American culture. Yeah, I mean, he was enjoyable to be with, especially when he came to London. Used to hang out with him, and he was, he didn't actually hold court, but he was such a remarkable figure that you wanted to hear him talk. I mean, you didn't really want to talk. I mean, some people wanted to obviously punish him with their opinions, but to most of the people I was with, we wanted to hear William Burroughs talk about things and make you laugh, because he was very humorous and would always have an interesting take and a sort of an anarchic idea, and a very unusual person. I like very much the scene when the typewriters, when they're about to have sex in their apartment, and the typewriter goes mad, and they whip, the woman comes in, Fidela comes in and whips the typewriter with her, which has got extremely excited, the typewriter, and sort of is oozing and is swelling in all sorts of places. and the typewriter is whipped hard and then is thrown out of the window. And by the time it lands at Ian Holm's feet, it's a typewriter. And I thought it was just you know, it was a moment that takes your breath away, and simplicity, yet it's so effective. So that was a very strong moment. And there are many moments in the film which make me laugh, and you sort of sheer filmmaking. For me, filmmaking genius is so simple. Ideas like having Ian Holm speaking, and you can recognise what he's saying, but he's speaking different words, you know. And he's speaking one with his lips. He's out of sync on purpose. And William Burroughs is listening to him and seeing him saying this, hearing him say these things to him, but his lips are saying something completely different, you know, on purpose. And it's just such a simple idea, just for a second, like that. And so that I found, was, you know, is something which I remember, you know, and something which I love it when I see things like that in a film, which is so, you know, simple but effective. You know, there's no histrionics, there's no millions of dollars of special effects and surround sound. It's just a little idea of moving somebody out of sync for a bit of dialogue, and the impact was gigantic.